And we're live.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the It's a Pandemic live stream show for the Planet Ant Training Center with your hosts, Mike and Andy.
We're back.
We're
No
back.
guest.
No guest today. The special guest is you. Everyone that's watching, you're the special guest today. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing, I didn't mute one of my windows. Now I'm hearing myself talk.
Oh,
Don't you just hate that? Oh, there we go. Close all those things. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
we are here going to talk about improv. This is a special live stream for our current Planet Ant Training Center students, former Planet Ant Training Center students, interested improvisers that have never had anything to do with the Planet Ant.
Right?
This is just a chance for you to sit around and gab about Prov because we can't do it in person anymore. So we're taking questions. We're open to any topics. If you are curious about any performance related thing or not, if you want to ask us,
Right.
the members of NSYNC, we'll do that too.
Pretty much anything goes on this live stream. It's for everyone. Von Wenk commenting, wow, only 2 or 3 minutes late, which seems like a dig right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate.
From Victor. Classic move, Victor.
I will say this, to start 3 minutes late, for a Planet Ant endeavor to start 3 minutes late is actually pretty good.
It's like kind of early, really. We should have waited a little bit longer, honestly. But have we considered hosting the Planet Ant videos on the Planet Ant website? Well, it's not necessarily a great way to do it if you try to host it yourself. When you have places like Vimeo or YouTube or whatever, they're constantly hosting videos. They have all the infrastructure built in. There is a link on the Planet Ant website that sends people to our YouTube, our Twitch, our Periscope, and all that good stuff. I put that in myself, so that should still be on the website, unless somebody else changed it, but I don't think so. I think
Where are Periscope people at?
Where's my Perry's?
Yeah, where the Perry's at? I don't know anything about any of this tech stuff, so
No.
I'm glad to have you and Darren figuring all that out.
No
If
problem, Andy. But I mean, this is your time to learn how to do all this stuff. you could really commit to learning some tech stuff right now during
Yeah.
the
I'm busy. We're knee deep in the Americans right now, so
Oh yeah.
that's how we're spending our quarantine watching shows. Russian spies living in America.
Yeah, I didn't get into the Americans too much yet, but I'm still trying to tell people about Perpetual Grace LTD, which is probably one of my favorite shows in the last couple of years that has come out.
I don't know what that is.
It's on the Epix network, which is odd. It's a weird network, but that's where it's airing. You can get it as a supplement to your Amazon, I think.
Mahmoud, our first ever guest on this here show, Mahmoud is asking, I wonder who's taking care of the mini garden in front of Planet Ant. I will say that in the life before the pandemic, there was a group of Boy Scouts that was helping out, but it was mostly our very own Mikey Brown and Birdie who would tend to that garden.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're stopping by and checking on it or not.
I don't know. There is like a community. It's a community garden technically, so it's like a Hamtramck thing, and I think there is like a group of folks that are working on it out there. So I think that's. I don't know. That might be what it's transitioned to. I'm not sure.
You should have seen that garden before we bought what is now a hall.
Yeah.
It used to be a reception hall, and it was a community garden at that point, but it was mostly just a mini landfill. it
was
disgusting how much stuff we hauled out of there.
Yeah.
And then all the work that Mikey and Birdie and those Boy Scouts put into it was great.
Kate Holmes is liking the Corn Beards boys.
Oh,
Hi,
I actually did. I didn't shave all the way, but I did do one pretty close crop trim at the beginning of all this.
Oh, really? So this is
It's
all post-quarantine growth right now?
this is PQG.
I highly recommend I highly recommend these beard tools that I got. They're
Okay.
really nice, Andy. I would highly recommend this beard brush. Feels, not only does it feel really good to brush it through your beard, but it straightens your beard out and makes it, even more in line there.
Right.
And then I got this guy here, which is kind of like a little, like a little beard comb, which is really nice too. And plus, it gets all the ticks and weevils out, which is great.
You got a lot of ticks and weedles going on in your beard?
Not anymore. Not anymore. And they make a delicious stew.
I haven't thought about ticks and weedles in my beard up until this point. Really, 2 months ago I wasn't I wasn't consumed by news about a virus either. So things change.
Things do change a little bit. They do change. I don't know. Any questions or thoughts about improv, about the quarantine, about what you've noticed on other live streams? We can open the floodgates to any kinds of questions or comments, and we can talk about whatever you guys are interested in today.
Yeah. I would love a couple prov questions if there's anything you're curious about out there.
Especially all our Periscope people, please.
Oh, yeah. Periscope people are notorious question askers. We all know that.
It's huge on Periscope. Oh, yeah. Especially improv is huge on Periscope, too.
Yeah. Improv's huge. Okay. The UCB ASCAT live shows were bomb, says Kate Holmes. I have not gone back and watched any of those yet. I heard they were great. I heard they raised a bunch of money for a good cause too, and they had. I saw the lineups. They had some like heavy hitters in there: John Gabris and Lauren Lapkus and Amy Poehler.
Did they do? I'm not even familiar with what they did. Did they do like everybody on separate cameras, or what did they do?
Yeah, it was a Zoom call. It looked a lot like our screen, but there was like 12 people in it.
Oh, okay.
So the ASCAT is their main stage show, and it's an Armando with a celebrity monologist. So I believe that's what they did, but I don't know. I have to go back and watch those.
Monologist. I like that word.
I know. Matt Besser is probably in a better position than most people to transition his improv to this situation, because he's been doing an actual like scenic improv podcast for so long, and that's
right.
There's not a ton of those out there. I'm talking about Improv for Humans. Mm-hmm. They get in a room together, they tell some stories, and then they actually do scenes. So that's not a ton different than what we're actually doing here right now. So I'm sure that they had Kay Holmes has a great podcast. Mm-hmm. But they do have some familiarity with this format, so I definitely want to go and check those out. Katie Shea said they were awesome too.
Yeah, that's cool. Is there a possibility to do improv while wearing masks if they open in Michigan? I don't really think that's going to be a thing that we're going to be on the forefront of. We're not gonna push to do live improv with masks on because, the masks themselves don't actually help. I mean, they help, but they don't prevent. It's not like it would keep us really safe if we were all in public and in person doing this stuff together. So it's kind of more of a matter of like, it does help. It's something that can help you. The masks, it's great for going to the grocery store. But if you're going to be in a live audience, that's not going to really be enough. One of the recent studies they did was breaking down where people got infected the most and where some of these hot spots were. And some of the things that they noticed was that people were much more likely to be infected in situations that were performance related, sadly. Like there was a choir that had a bunch of people singing, and they decided to break quarantine and get together and do it. And almost every single person in the choir became infected, with a few of them dying as well, because of the fact that if you're singing or speaking loudly, like you would in a performance venue, you're going to be expelling a lot more from your body, and which will get into the air and into other people's respiratory systems, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So.
if you think about it, a choir is just a group of people shouting together.
Pretty much. Very controlled shouting. Yep.
Yeah, it's beautiful shouting.
I'm just gonna call it shouting from now on, I think.
Yeah,
Like, you know.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful rhythmic shouting.
This rhythmic shouting is just really gorgeous.
You're spewing your inside juices farther.
Ooh, the juices must really be going with this rhythmic shouting right now. Oh, it's so delightful.
I don't really have an interest in watching an improv set with everybody in masks and gloves. I will earlier this week I read a story about a gentleman's club in Omaha who is right now planning to open next week with erotic dancers wearing masks and gloves, which
it's not gonna do anything.
No,
it's not gonna do anything.
If you're getting a lap dance and she's grinding her naked body on you, the masks and gloves aren't helping.
Yeah, the juices are everywhere at that point.
Yeah, the juices are everywhere. I don't know what or when the first live improv show that we're going to be able to do is going to look like or feel like.
Yeah, it's so weird to even think about, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, honestly, thinking about it, it's like something that we have to wait until things are different. And I mean, things have changed. This whole world is different right now. We got a lot of people getting very complacent, deciding that it's fine to go back and do things and to take masks off and to go grocery shop and gather in large groups and whatever. But it's not scientifically proven or agreed upon that it's a good idea to do that now. So as far as it goes, not a good idea.
I went grocery shopping today. There was a lot of people out and about.
Yeah.
A lot more now than there were 2-3 weeks ago, which is scary because we just went back over 1,000 cases a day in Michigan.
Yep.
But let's get back to something fun. My beautiful wife asked us a question.
Let's answer her question.
If you could do a Zoom set with anyone in the improv world, who would it be? Wow. And let's tack on why.
That's interesting. Yeah, and why? Why is good too. Answer this for yourselves too, audience. We'd love to see what you have to say. Andy, do you want to start?
Sure. My entry point into improv was Comedy Bang Bang, the podcast. So if I could improvise with anybody, it would be a lot of people that I look up to and respect from that show. Lauren Lapkus, Jason Mantzoukas, Andy Daly.
Choose one. Just one.
Mantzoukas.
All right.
Yeah.
And why Mantzoukas as the first choice?
I read a story about him one time. When I was in classes and stuff and learning about improv, I was really interested in seeing these people I knew from podcasts do like whole sets. And this is before I realized that nobody really posts full sets of improv online anywhere. But I would Google like Andy Daly improv set or whatever. And Googling that, I found a story by Mantzoukas or about Mantzoukas, and it was titled "The Best Improv Show I've Ever Seen." And he did a one-man silent improv set. So he completely silent. He was the only person on stage. It was about 20 to 25 minutes, and the entire thing was him writing a suicide note.
Oh, wow.
And the guy said it was just the most compelling thing he'd ever seen, and his attention to detail and his ability to emote on stage and to tell this entire story about this guy coming to terms with what he was doing, deciding, and then just ultimately deciding to live he was just like, it was an improv show. It was a piece of art that I watched, and that's always stuck in my mind as something I just really respect him as an improviser. I'd love to do it. What about you, Mike?
Cool. Well, was there any stipulations? It was just who would you like to do a show with, right?
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, my entry point was more of like an SNL type thing. So I was kind of introduced to improv and the idea of it kind of through, secondarily through SNL. And one of the people that I really loved on there was Tim Meadows. And we did get to do some improv with Tim Meadows with the Improv Project one year when he came to Detroit. So that was one person I always looked up to. But another one that's probably still one of my all-time favorites that unfortunately he's passed on, but Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was to me one of my comedy heroes when I was kind of in that zone of getting started in this stuff, and always looked up to him and thought he was just hilarious. And unfortunately, yeah, Phil Hartman's dead. Sorry, Andy. I didn't know if you knew that. It was not COVID related though. It was his ex-wife. Okay, let's not get into it.
Yeah. We did lose a comedy legend today.
We did. Fred Willard passed. Yeah. Very sad. But he was 86. It's, that's a good life, man. I hope that I can make it to at least that age, That would be fantastic.
Kate says Catherine O'Hara, which
Catherine O'Hara would be amazing. Hell yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see. We have a bunch of comments from Dustin that make no sense.
I guess Dustin's main critique of the show seems to be that I'm talking too much, which is it's just a wild accusation from Dustin.
And it's a wild accusation. That is a complete. Look up the word projection, Dustin. Check it out. Will there be a picture of you? No, that's just going to be a definition of the word projection.
We talked about what improv shows would look like. He says, "What could we have a plastic screen between the stage and the audience?" And that just really fucking bums me out.
Well, and plus, where do you end the plastic screens, right? You're going to put one between the performers and the audience. You got to put one between each of the performers. Then you have to put one between each of the audience members. Unless we get a gigantic warehouse and draw circles that are all, 6 to 10 feet apart from each other and have people sit in those. Not great.
Or are we going to, make our own outfits from Bubble Boy, starring Jake Gyllenhaal?
I like how you added in starring Jake Gyllenhaal. That's good.
Of course. Yeah.
Never forget.
Yeah. I did see somebody was selling protective gear. There was just a big clear plastic bubble that you put over your whole head.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Wearing a fishbowl? No, thank you.
No, it doesn't sound good at all. Ugh. I had there was some other good comments that I wanted to address, but we kind of scrolled past them, and I don't think I think they were on YouTube, however. I wanted to talk about the one that Von Wink posted a second ago here. Let me see if I can find it.
We've got a good question from Von Wink. Oh yeah, our comment feed can only scroll back so far. So when somebody posts 15 comments about how Mike and I are both talking too much,
it kind of kills it, yeah, when there's that many. Sorry, I'm an over poster. Yeah, it's good to be self-aware, Dustin. It's good to be self-aware.
See, that sounds like a good Seinfeld and Current Day sketch. Over poster. Now we're talking. Mm-hmm. That sounds like a whole 20-minute Seinfeld. Roast talker. Now it's 2020 and it's an over poster, baby.
Von Wink said, is the use of terms like play and games mostly branding since you work to teach the skill and it seems to involve work? Well, I'm gonna just say right out of the gate that play in games is not branding at all, because that is the essence of what improv is. But play and games revolve around getting better at certain skills. You have to be able to be good at things like communication and listening and watching and understand and empathy. You have to be good at a lot of those things, and that's what improv works at, and it gets you to work at it. And a lot of work, it's a lot of practice, it's a lot of churning through and trying again and again and getting better at it. So,
and these are definitely not terms that are specific to any one theater or community.
Right.
These are ubiquitous improv terms. I do think that the idea of game, when we're talking about it, is not always serviced by the actual word game, because it's used in so many different contexts in improv.
Yeah. So,
you have short form has games, and then in long form improv, we're talking about finding the game and following the game. And I think sometimes that leads to confusion. So is there a better way to discuss what we mean when we're talking about the game of the scene? Maybe. Am I the person that's going to break through and change improv vernacular forever? Probably not.
Right. Yeah. It's not really an option. I mean, you kind of have to go with what the, whatever words are decided by the community. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, Von Wenk, but I do think that it's really not branding. I mean, as much as anything is branding, I guess. Yeah. But they weren't specifically created to get people involved with improv. So I think, that's where the distinction is for sure.
In terms of the word play, I just think it's an appropriate term for the essence of what we are trying to do. The biggest hurdle for a lot of new improvisers, and the thing that frustrates people a lot, is that they just can't let themselves let go on stage, and that they can learn the theory and they know what goes into a good scene, where they need to go, but not being able to just let loose up there holds them back from true, fun, engaging improv.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
We're talking about play. It's a way to open people's minds up to accessing their own imaginations. From the age of 10 on, we are constantly being told to quiet down in public, to mind your manners, to not goof off,
to not stand out,
to get in line, to silence that part of yourself that is that creative side of yourself that you're going to need to access to have good improv. So when we talk about play and horsing around and stuff, we're talking about accessing imagination and creativity, which a lot of people stifle through going about everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of that for me, a big thing, and I remember this getting into improv years ago, I was scared to let go because I thought that I would look stupid, which is about the dumbest thing you can think as far as improv goes, because you want to look stupid. You want to make, you want to let the audience see you, and you want to let them see you as being stupid. The more you try to control it, the more you try to tamp it down, the more you try to lock it in, the worse it is. It just doesn't work if you're trying hard to control it,
And yeah, people get in their own heads about embarrassing themselves or whatever in front of an audience. But have you ever sat down and watched a movie and been like that part in Back to the Future when that guy gets the dung dumped on him?
Yeah, right.
Watch that and been like, wow, that's so embarrassing for that actor. That's not how people look at comedy or process comedy. I've never done something wild or crazy on stage and gotten off and had an audience member be like, that was a fun show, but when you were playing that sassy horse, that was like really embarrassing for you to watch you like go down on hands and knees like and like clomp around. That was really embarrassing to watch. That's never happened. So
yeah, but it's hilarious how much when we teach improv, we run into kids, like a lot of the kids that we teach, and they'll be like scared to play something that they're not, you know, and a lot of times it involves stuff that a lot of kids are nervous about, which is any kind of like romantic interest or something like that. Like you can't play any characters that have any sort of thing like that because they're so embarrassed with that concept, right? 100%. But a lot of times it's because these kids are kind of like aligning themselves with their characters and they think that they can't perform things that are outside of who their characters are, which is just hilarious.
It's funny to me watching the high school kids that we are teaching in DCP, like prepping for them, sitting in front of the classroom as they're filing in to the room and watching them come in like draped over each other and screaming and shouting and like acting like total goofballs.
And then it's like, we need a volunteer for whatever, you know, and then it's silence.
As soon as we're like, hey, let's come up and be silly with us, they shut down. And I think there really is benefit in being able to be free and do silly stuff while you are being paid attention to.
Yeah, like, right. Exactly.
Totally, yeah.
That's exactly it. And it is about that, like most art kind of shares that same thing where you have to have that unbound passion kind of thing coming out of you, but still be able to be in control of when that's happening and how it's happening. Like all dramatic theater is the same way. All performance music is the same way. Singing, it's like you have to be good at letting go of the control, but at the same time being able to maintain yourself within that environment and make it something that people can understand what's happening. Dustin, you might want to listen to that part again, rewind it, and listen again to what I just said. The control is definitely super important. I worked with an actor one time, and we were doing a version of Hamlet, and they're a great actor, and they were really good at losing control within the structure of the thing, but had an issue with the sword fight. And one time during a rehearsal, they fell off the stage during the sword fight sequence. And that's something that's like, you cannot lose control to the extent where you are putting yourself, the safety of yourself or others at risk. But you have to lose control within the confines of the performance, within the confines of the stage. You know, it's a very strange thing in art where you want to be able to let go of everything, but still maintain that somehow, that control, you know?
It's like there's no like definitive line there, you know, like, because if you think about actors, you hear about people going method or whatever, that like Daniel Day-Lewis lived as Lincoln for 4 months.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Or
it still didn't make that movie that great to me.
No. I thought his performance was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was just not that great of a film.
No. What's his name? Leo DiCaprio in The Revenant, like, actually ate a horse heart. Like, nobody's asking you to really eat a real horse heart.
You don't have to. You do not have to. You don't have to eat a horse heart.
I don't. So, where's the line? What's the line? With that stuff, especially in improv.
Yeah. Well, what's the most unsafe you've ever felt on stage, as far as like physically unsafe during a set?
There was one set we did with a group, one of my first like actual improv groups, called Last Call, with Tam White, Amy Phillips, and Scotty Ice Noggle. And it was a set where the ant was in the round.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there was a small triangle of stage that was behind some of the risers, and I always like playing around with the space and finding creative sight lines and creative stage pictures. So I saw that little triangle, and I made it a hot tub. So I got in it, and I was like sitting down in the little triangle under the risers, and all of them came onto me. So they all came into the hot tub too. So it's like me, and then Scott, and then Amy, and then Tam, and I as soon as they were all on me, I just felt my rib cage like tightening, and this. It's like a long scene. I didn't know how to get out of it, and
oh god, that's the worst.
Made me like physically ill. Like I felt I felt like the kid on the short end of the stick on the scrambler.
Right. Yeah.
Completely smushed.
Yeah.
So yeah. What about you?
Well, I was doing a set at the old Improv Inferno. Shout out to Dan Izzo. But yeah, Improv Inferno was an improv theater in Ann Arbor in the early 2000s. And during that time, we used to do, we did so many sets out there. And one night we were doing a thing called the X Show. That was our late night improv show. So sometimes people get pretty sloppy and drunk and stuff at that point. But we still like to have fun and, just tried to do some interesting stuff. But there was this guy that came in from Chicago, and I didn't really know him. Nobody really knew him there, but he knew Dan from the old days in Chicago when Dan worked at The Annoyance. And so this guy was like, Dan was like, hey, I'm going to invite this guy to play the set. Cool. All right, great. So we start the set, and first thing out of the gate, I'm getting the scene. It's like the third scene or something like that. And I initiated it by sitting on the stage like this, laying on the stage and having my head held in my hands like this, my feet up. I was like a teenage girl on her bed or something like that. And this guy decides that it's his opportunity to body slam me. So he runs from off stage, jumps, and actually body slams me as hard as he could into the stage. And my head pushed off of my hands and went ba-boom and bounced off the stage. Dislocated my jaw kind of. Like for the next month, I couldn't it hurt to chew and stuff like that. It was real bad. But yeah, that guy, what were you thinking? You can't do that sort of thing.
I'm certainly not the best representative of safe improv. I've definitely made my choices that were not. But I think for me, when I do that, I'm the one I put at risk. I know that I'm a physical performer. Mm-hmm. I know the people that I perform with that are interested in also being physical performers.
Right.
I know the people that I perform with that do not want to be touched on stage, that don't want to be picked up or that don't want to wrestle around. I know those people too, and I know that I'm not going to do that with them. Mm-hmm. But I've done things like, do you know the little crow's nest window on the Go stage?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Open. During Snow Day one time, I scaled the outside of the stage facade and crawled into that from the stage. And it was like it was one of the last sets of Snow Day, so everybody was kind of tired and drunk. Yeah. And I did that, and we finished the set, and PJ met me around back after the set just to be like, hey, that was fun. Never ever do that again.
Say that. Hey, that was fun again. That sounded exactly like PJ.
Hey, that was fun. Never do that again.
Well, the first time you killed it. I thought it sounded just like PJ. Hey, that was fun. I don't know if I could do it, but yeah. But yeah, that being unsafe on stage it's very scary because you got to be in front of the audience and you got to, I've had other mishaps. I tore a muscle in my stomach one time doing air splits as a football player character one time.
Oh.
Yeah, I had shorts on during this performance too, and the belt was cinched too tight. So then when I slammed into the stage after not being able to do the air splits properly, and then it just like tore a muscle there, and I was out for like a week after that. That was really bad. Stage injuries, improv injuries.
Joey Morris asks, what are some of the most memorable audience reactions you've ever had? Do you have any stories that come to mind?
Wow, I don't know. I don't know. It's really hard to judge audience. Whenever I'm in those moments, I'm never thinking about the audience. I'm never like, it's only in self-reflection that or when I'm watching somebody else that I get into what the audience is doing, you know? Especially when I'm watching other improvisers because, I find the audience fascinating, and sometimes I just get like, having seen so much improv, I get a little bored sometimes. So I'm like, well, let me watch the audience and see what's up with them. Yeah. So I don't know about any specifics. I mean, there's so many great feelings that accompany a really good comedy performance when you're in it. And I don't feel like I reflect on what the audience is doing as much as I feel what's happening with them and I'm rolling with them, Yeah. I mean, there's different types of waves of laughter that can happen, and sometimes breaks and then resurgences of the laughter, and it's like this organic, beautiful synergy between the performer and the audience. But I don't have any real specific things except for maybe like recalling moments of hecklers or something like that, Yeah,
which like I will say the best crowd in Detroit. I play everywhere. I'm on the home team. I'm on Resco. I'm on the league. I play everywhere. The best place to play is in the black box when it's full.
Yeah.
When you get 50 or 60 people in there and it's just this explosion of energy.
Yeah.
That's great. But that being said, a showdown crowd at Go, when they're rowdy and into it, is a completely different thing because it's much more of an uninitiated crowd that might not know what they're in for. And that show is set up like an R-rated Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right.
So that energy is a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. That's the only place you play in Detroit, and you kind of feel like a celebrity afterwards because people treat you different when you're dressed in like nice clothes and doing like a Whose Line type show.
It's true. Yeah, it's true, and especially that they're uninitiated. They're not as familiar with it.
And the Ann Arbor crowds are great. They now going into like year 3 at Pointless, they really get it. So
that's cool. I mean, I always tend to think of an audience as almost like one individual. You know what I mean? Like it's like a different person every time, and it's kind of an amalgamation of all the different people that are sitting in that crowd. Sometimes they can be quiet and really enjoy the show, and afterwards have this effusive string of compliments for everybody involved in the show. It's odd how audiences change from location and place and size and configuration and whatnot.
Yeah.
Boy, God, I got to catch up on these Dustin comments, I guess.
Yeah. Victor's got a question for us. Shouldn't the difference between improv and scripted theater, like Hamlet, be that script acts as a guardrail against the performers losing control? I would like a couple more examples from Von Wink, what he means by scripted theater.
I mean,
I've heard of Hamlet, but can you remind me what else is out there?
What else is out there? I mean, I don't think that's I think no matter if it's improv or if it's scripted, you still have to balance the performer losing control. The words are not about control. When you are saying words in a scripted show, you want to be able to lose control during that moment. That's where you get those virtuoso performances. That's where you get an incredible performance from like a Max von Sydow or a I don't know, any other great actor out there.
The idea of control on stage is so there's this tacit understanding that all of this is for show, right?
Right.
So you want in theater, improv or scripted, you want it to feel as real as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to feel like you're opening up a window into this world that you're showing the audience. But everyone in the room understands that it's a piece of art. So when I'm talking about losing control, I mean, as a performer, can you safely access that whatever emotion you need to show, but also do it in a way that's safe for everyone on stage
and makes sense too? That's also the other part of it: safety and making sense. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. If you're in a situation where you are a wildly emotional character, great, awesome. While you're flailing around and doing whatever you do, you need to be keenly aware of everyone else on stage and know that what you are doing is not purposely or otherwise putting them in harm's way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that it makes sense. I mean, one of the things about that is that an example of that might be if you're going on stage and playing a really quiet, whispery character, you still have to make sure that the audience understands what you're saying, even though you're supposed to be quiet. You know, you can't get the audience to understand you, then you're not doing a good job as a performer. Von Wenck brought up Nicolas Cage. That's a guy that kind of built his career on losing control more than having any control, which is great. I kind of always would prefer to see a less controlled actor than a more controlled actor as far as entertainment value goes. I think that's going to give you a much better experience from the performance.
Yeah. But if you want to talk virtuoso performances,
yeah,
I highly recommend you Google highlight reel of Vampire's Kiss.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't necessarily know that you have to watch the full movie, but just watch that utter lunacy. It's a movie where you just slowly watch him break from reality and have a complete breakdown.
Yeah.
And it is truly remarkable how insane he can be.
Oh yeah, he is great at it. I watched that movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a recent film with him where he's part of these, like, the parents, all the parents in this town or this whatever, they all just lose control and try to murder their children. I don't know if you saw that, Andy, but God, it's worth it for sure, just because of how insane Nicolas Cage gets. But I mean, that's what acting is in definition, is you want to be able to get that insane, but you gotta at the same time have the control to make it make sense, make it safe, and to make that character more interesting, because we're all trying to control. We're all controlling our own. We're all putting up a pretense to the outside world with everything that we do in life, and that's kind of what makes a character. Is
I think is a very good example of a piece of art that highlights what we're talking about. Is The Master by Paul Thomas Anderson. You have two phenomenal actors playing against each other. Joaquin is more in that, like, visceral, physical realm, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is much more in that quiet power. You feel the rage in that character through his much more subtle performance. But watching those two is a really, really interesting look into how you can use different energy types to engage an audience. Like, both of those performances in that movie are so compelling, and they're coming from such different styles of performance. Just go watch that whole fucking movie. I love it.
It's a great film. It's a really great film. You kind of have to be a fan of Paul Thomas Anderson to get into those kinds of films. I find some people don't like them because there's not enough narrative structure to it in a traditional sense. Like, Boogie Nights is his most accessible film. But when you get into, like, some of the other stuff like The Master, some people get a little weirded out by how little narrative structure there is to it in an obvious sense. You know what I mean?
All right, you're gonna get weirded out watching Joaquin jerk off to a mermaid he made out of sand. Come on,
I'm not.
Come on.
I'm not at all. I'm gonna watch it again.
You're telling me that that Inherent Vice is inaccessible just because uh, the narrator of that movie is on heroin and doesn't understand what's happening, so then the movie is completely confusing.
I love that
Because
movie. I don't care.
I think that's
It's
an
great.
underrated one. So
Yeah.
that is such an interesting idea to me. That movie is set up like a typical film noir where you're following a PI trying to solve a case, but you quickly understand that none of what he's doing and none of what he's following makes any sense. And
Yeah.
as the movie unfolds, you realize that he's a junkie, and none of it makes sense because he doesn't know what, like he
Uh-huh.
has no concept of time or reality because he's just shooting up. So that is just a really interesting
Yeah.
look
The
at
definition of the unreliable narrator, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But a great film, and I watched it with other people that hated it. Like
Yeah.
they absolutely hated it because there's some people that just really prefer a film that has a very structured narration going on to it, so you really are very clear what's happening exactly. Do you Von Wank, another comment from do you reject the idea of movies being a system in which every piece is supposed to fit together, and does that theory only apply to films as opposed to plays? No, I think it applies to all narrative works, books, short stories, comics, anything that's trying to tell a story. Every single element should add to that story, no matter what it is.
This is actually something I've been advocating and pushing for in our improv. If I've coached you or taught you recently, you've heard me talk about this. But here in Detroit, we do very loose, long form, a very loose style of improv. So when you see a set, you they do a scene, they sweep edit the scene, they move on to the next scene, and there's no narrative connection, there's no tie. We don't put any work into connecting things or reusing the stuff we make. And I think really that there's some really phenomenal stuff you can do with improv
Mm-hmm.
if you treat the set as its own piece of art. So I love creating scenes that then you can try to find connectivity between, that you can reuse characters, that you can reuse scenarios, that you can reuse ideas, so that you're kind of like folding the set in on itself,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes more of a piece of art than just a loose connection of scenes. So
Not necessarily callbacks, Von Wank. I would say it's more like what Andy is saying. It's like all of the stuff that you are building in the beginning is utilized later. Like all of the pieces would be utilized
I think
to explore and expand upon those ideas, not necessarily just call them back. A callback is definitely just like mentioning the thing and bringing that thing back into it. Like if Andy and I did a set and in the very first thing was we were fighting over a signed Bill Laimbeer basketball, and then we bring that back up later in the set is like, oh, here's your Bill Laimbeer basketball. That's like a callback to that same idea. But what I think what yeah, go ahead, Andy.
a lot of times when we set out to tell one story in improv, here it becomes a mess because we're too focused on finding, creating, and solving a plot.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is using everything we have. So at the top of a set, building characters who have relationships and are going to go on some sort of journey together based on what they're going to learn and feel about each other moving on, and then exploring that by bringing those ideas and characters back through the set. And one of the reasons I think we don't do a lot of that here in Detroit is because when Second City left, we didn't want to continue some of the stuff we didn't like from them. And their major form is the Herald, and there's always been an aversion to the Herald in Detroit that permeates to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So, when just briefly, if Victor or anybody doesn't know what a herald is, it's basically a form where you have 3 core scenes that you're going to revisit again and again and again through the set 3 times. At the end, you're going to try to find a way to bring those 3 core scenes together and close the world in on itself.
Right.
And when it's done right, it's really cool to watch all these made up things seemingly naturally fit together in a way we never could have planned at the top of the set. So that kind of stuff is something I'm really interested in. Is treating everything on stage as if it is part of the show and there to be explored.
Yeah, I think that's. I would really like to see more structured, like Herald-esque improv go on in Detroit, and maybe when we get back, people will be more hungry to do it or have a little bit more time to commit to it or something.
I believe the last show my beautiful wife did was the new all-female Herald troupe at Go.
When you say beautiful wife, are you saying that because you have more than one wife?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, my beautiful wife.
Is Anna the beautiful one?
Anna's my beautiful wife. I have my attic wife.
Oh, your attic wife. Oh boy,
yeah.
That doesn't sound too great. That doesn't
no, she's hunched over because it's not that tall in there.
How long are her fingernails?
Well, that she eats them, so.
Yeah, I mean, I really would love to explore and expand a little bit more of the narrative style improv, honestly.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of stuff that was like, hey, here's A Christmas Carol, and we're going to improvise a version of that. Here's It's a Wonderful Life, we're going to improvise a version of that. So, we utilize the 3-act structure, we break it down, we take it apart and go like, here's all the pieces that we need to do stuff with and do something original with that. So, I mean, we've done stuff like that before, but it's always a little bit more structured than just the loose style of the Herald, But I think that I'd like to get more into that.
Yeah, we do. That's one of the main tenets of the form we do at Pointless is trying to reuse scenes, and we've gotten some pretty good fun results out of it. So our basic structure is two unconnected scenes up top, and then try to find a way to bring those 2 storylines together through the show.
That's cool. That's fun.
Yeah. Would you?
Anthony Douglas says, would you rather be on a deconstruction team or a Herald team? What would you rather be on?
Decon, baby.
I don't feel as strongly. I think both would be fun. I could get something different out of both of them. I guess maybe the Herald is what I would choose more than the Decon, but I don't know. I have less experience with Decon than I do with Herald-esque stuff. So
Decon's probably my favorite form. I'm still in debt due to an English major, so maybe that has something to do with it. But I love the Decon.
What about you in the audience? Answer too. We're curious to know what you guys all like.
So if anybody's unfamiliar with it, it's a form driven by a source scene that you're going to see several times throughout the show. So it's a show for a big cast. You would 2 improvisers at the top are designated to be your source scene couple. And then the rest of the show is performed by the ensemble. So you start a decon with a 2-person scene, and it is strictly to explore their relationship. We at the Ant are a relationship character driven improv style. So the idea of the source scene, it really plays to what we are trying to do. But you are going to do a 2-person scene to explore their relationship, what's going on between them, how they feel about each other, to then give the ensemble something to play with. They're going to watch that opening scene and then do a run of scenes based on it thematically. They're going to pull apart that source scene based on themes. If it's a scene about a dad getting a kid ready to go off to college, those themes might be parenthood, growing up, moving apart, evolving, things like that. And you explore scenes based on that theme. Then we see those two again. Now some time has passed, and we explore their relationship a few years on. Then the ensemble watches that, and their next run is a commentary run where they explore the ideas and themes of the set from personal opinions or thoughts that they have on what's going on. So you might watch this college thing and say, secondary education in America is out of control. And that's where you start your commentary scene. That's your initiation for your scene in that run. We see the source scene again. Then we have the third and final run is called the tangent. And you're kind of now you're bringing all of it together. It's callbacks. We're introducing scenes. We're seeing characters again. We're playing with everything from the set. It's on the table, and then you finish with a final look at the source scene couple. And when that all comes together, a decon can really be beautiful.
Von Wink asked, is it Harold or Herald? Like the name or like the flag person or trumpet person or whatever you want to call it. It's the name, and the reason is because the inventor of the Herald, Del Close, hi Dan Tice, the inventor of the Herald, Del Close, said, well, the Beatles had a name for their haircut, so we're going to name this the Herald. So that's why they named it the Herald. That's the story, at least. Who knows? Yeah. So we are at an hour, so that's the end of the show for today. Anything else, Andy, to wrap things up?
Do we want to ask one of these people that have been with us today to be on the show next week?
Yeah,
Kate
I
Holmes
think that sounds great. Yeah, who's interested in joining us next week? Why don't you give me a private message through Facebook? All of you there are friends with me. If not, give me you can contact me through the Planet Ant website or through email at mikemcgettigan@planetant.com or Mike McG. Kate Holmes, I already told you I would. Well, that anger is not going to put you first in line, Kate.
No, more anger.
More anger. Great. Well, we'll probably have Kate Holmes next week then. So join us next week for our special guest, Kate Holmes, and we'll be back every Saturday until the apocalypse finally finishes up. Wash hands, wash hands, wash hands. And we'll see you guys next week, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Set your clocks, and we'll see you on the other side. Boy, that was a great outro, but now I have to do this setup thing here like this. I didn't do the transition properly, but there you go.
Oh, Nicole just jumped in.
Oh no. And now it's the end.
Tail end.
Goodbye, Nicole.
Goodbye, Nicole. You saw the last 30 seconds.
Bye. We love you, everybody.